I'll be the first to admit, when The Last of Us was coming to HBO as a TV series, I was a little skeptical and I held back my feelings just a little bit. As a longtime fan of the show, I was just worried that they were going to maybe derail this train that they had going here. But we still gripped on to the ride, and boy, am I glad that we did, because it was an absolute thrill. So much so, we had to dump our thoughts here live on the internet. We planned on getting together and talking for 10, 20 minutes, but spoiler alert, we just got into it deep and let it fly. So I hope that you buckle up here and enjoy the ride that we took through our thoughts. All right, welcome to the channel. Nathan, how we doing here today?
Hey, Burdett, I'm doing great.
Good, good.
Thanks for having me. Ready to talk some Last of Us.
Yeah, so The Last of Us just wrapped up. The season finale was just a little bit ago here. And we've been watching it together pretty much throughout the majority of the season, and we're just dying to talk about it here a little bit.
Been off on the phone every week, so we gotta do this
Exactly.
recap.
So this was The Last of Us was a 9-episode series that spanned throughout the last couple of weeks here, and it's been an absolute roller coaster. In my opinion, they pretty much just smashed it out of the park. I know I was a little skeptical going in, but all through and through, they were very true to the storyline of the game, which is kind of surprising, honestly, a little bit for a video game series to be adapted into, mainstream or a TV show or movies or anything like that. There's usually a lot of liberties that are done around to change things. But honestly, I think that they took The Last of Us in a fantastic direction.
Yeah, I think going into this, it wasn't even the thought process wasn't even like what was going to be different. It was how is it going to be different from the game, and
Yeah,
that really just there's so few instances of that, and
for
I
sure.
think would be a big relief for particularly for us as big fans of the original game.
Yeah, yeah. So to definitely kick things off, Nathan and I here have been long-running fans of The Last of Us. We played it way back when it originally came out on the PS3, and even when it came out then, we talked about where we were in the games, got connected and everything like that, and we're excited for the very first game that came out, the second game that came out, and now even with the TV series coming out now, we hopped on calls every weekend, did a little watch party together just to encapsulate each other's thoughts live, which was a fantastic experience. But the way that it really set itself in stone here right off the bat, and how we thought it would kick off for the rest of the season, was definitely with episode 1 and how they handled it. And we're going to shy away from spoilers here pretty much throughout, but we'll be talking about a little bit of detail here for episode 1, but it's not really considered spoilers. But it's definitely following Joel and his daughter Sarah, and how the apocalypse kind of unfolds. And it's such a powerful point in the beginning of the game that is really, it really sets you into what kind of game and now what show you're going to be watching. And they've talked about how hard it is to establish something like that, where they introduce you to the characters and you have to feel such a sense of attachment to them, because unfortunately, Joel's daughter doesn't quite make it through the initial breakout as some processes unfolded as the chaos ensued. But the TV series was able to give us a little bit more backstory and detail and really roped you in just to tear your heart out a little bit. Honestly, when I rewatched it, it almost killed me to rewatch that scene again, just because of how touching they handled it in both the video game and in the show.
The first 30 minutes of episode 1 on the show were probably maybe my 30 favorite minutes of it in its entirety.
For
You
sure.
start off with, not to stay away from spoilers, of course, but you start off with greater detail of the day leading into the evening before the outbreak, with just kind of more suspense and events leading up to it. Like, why is there so many sirens today? What's going on? You
Hmm.
can tell everyone's a little bit on edge, and then the actual evening time when the outbreak occurs and it turns into chaos. It was just then tying it and thinking into how the game handled that same situation, and it's like you're just having tense flashbacks,
Hmm.
and then you just come feel like it's out live like this on a TV show where you're
Yeah.
just so immersed into it. Where it's like, oh my gosh.
Because it definitely feels real in the game, but watching it, with actual like real actors, things like that on the show is just another sense of depth that just makes everything feel so intense and so real. It's honestly crazy the way that they handled it. And it really does kind of show you like an unfold of like, what do you do? When that is happening, while everything is unfolding before your eyes, you see desperation in them. On like they're trying to flee their city and go to another city nearby, and if they get out of their city, they'll be fine. And Sarah, the daughter, brings up, "What if it's everywhere?" And you can see everyone just pause and think for a second, like, it might be, but we need to get out of this city first and go to another one. And it's definitely true. It makes you really think like, what is going to happen as this unfolds, and you get to like experience it with the chaos and split second decisions. It's a fantastic start.
Yeah. As they were towards the end of the episode when they're driving through the secondary smaller town as they're really in the thick of the outbreak, it pans to the back of the vehicle into the sky. You can see an airplane like lighting into flames and coming down.
Hmm.
At that point, my jaw was dropping. Like, oh my gosh! Like I am so into this right now. I can't look away.
Yep, for sure. Right there, you're in for like a pure chaotic ride.
So, episode
And
one did a fantastic job, I think, of drawing everyone in and keeping
definitely. Yep.
everyone
And getting
engaged.
a massive sense of attachment towards all the characters just to feel the rift that happens right afterwards. And that kind of even extends then into episode two. But in episode two, we even get a little bit more backstory that I think was fantastic to include into the show. Introducing kind of like when people are starting to first discover that there's going to be a problem. And it introduces this scene in a foreign country with a doctor that is inspecting one of the very first patients that they'd had neutralized, I guess you could say, and is on like a cadaver kind of table. And when she realizes that this fungus is starting to affect people and how it is manipulating their brains and thoughts, she knows that there is nothing that they can do. There's nothing to stop this fungal infection. And the military personnel ask the doctor what there is to do, and all she has to say is bomb the city. Just try to eliminate the city before this gets out any further, which granted, it had already been spreading as far as what we can tell, just beyond the city anyways like that. But initial thoughts of something is out of our control, what to do? Well, we just need to eliminate the city. We got to stop this where it's starting.
And two, as far as I can remember, I think that's the uh, first point of talking about it in a global aspect.
Hmm.
Like I think it's presumed that it's a global phenomenon, but that was the first instance I can remember where they actually acknowledged that fact and took it outside of the United States and brought it to a global problem.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought that
definitely. I thought it was an excellent addition to kind of see, just the very first steps on how things were being taken. And without that, it kind of sets a good foundation for what's to come as well. Like then in the next episode, we finally get to kind of see like clickers and things like that, some zombies that are very well known in the game. And they did a really good job as well of implementing the clickers into the show as well. In fact, they said in the recap that they took on original fans of the game that knew exactly how clickers worked and things like that to play the roles, which I think is a fantastic idea. To get people that are true fans of the game to act out scenes. Honestly, when you are introduced to the first clickers, I was as terrified as I am in the game. They did such a good job with the makeup and everything, and the movements were spot on, which is a good another point. The comparisons of the movements and the scenes leading up to at least this point are dang near spot on through episode 1 to introduction of the clickers here as well. It was such a good implementation to being introduced to a clicker.
A small tidbit on the clickers that I didn't realize until very recently is that there are the same voice actors for the clicker noises from the game as they are in the TV show.
Sure.
I don't know. At least two of them are the same ones from the video game.
Yeah,
I thought that,
sure.
It's like, no wonder it seems so familiar and chilling.
Yeah, they definitely did a good portion of that and bringing in original actors and things like that to tie really things together. It's that kind of attention to detail that I think they did a fantastic job on roping everything together. Well, and then after that episode, you kind of start finally rolling into a little bit of the backstory. You have Ellie with Joel. They're starting on their adventure. They're thinking Joel and Ellie are still a little distant from each other. They just met, and Joel's just kind of this like hardened character. Well, both of them kind of are these hardened characters that have a little bit of distance with themselves. But you really start having just in general to build friendship with each other as they proceed along. And this is where they first did a slight change, which it didn't change too much from the show to the from the video game, and they arrived in Kansas City here next, which I believe in the video game they arrived in Pittsburgh. Am I correct with that?
That is correct, yep.
But otherwise, basically the same things kind of unfold in Kansas City. You kind of are met in a circumstance where you're starting to introduce people into the series, and you're starting to realize, how much conflict there are just with different divisions as you're going through as well. Not just with zombies. There's just as much tension between different groups of people into zombies as well.
Yeah, you can really trust nobody. There are no friends. Even in the Boston QZ, there was such few relationships. Mm-hmm. And then you leave that, and not only do you have to worry about infected, you have to worry about every surrounding. And you go into this unknown city, and you see that the QZ has been breached, and it's just you don't know what you're getting into, and you can't trust any of these people.
Yep, for sure. And you can tell when that episode kind of starts that Joel has been through this before. He's experienced more of life, and he instantly knows not to trust people, where initially when Ellie first sees groups of people, she's saying, well, we have to pull over and help them. But Joel knows instantly that they're bad news, which it does turn out that they definitely were bad news.
Exactly.
Definitely. And when you're introduced to Kansas City, I think it kind of extends to episode 5 as well. But you're definitely introduced to, without getting into too many spoilers here as well, but you're definitely introduced to finally a portion of Kansas City where you're met with like every zombie that's in the game. In fact, an all-out horde comes out, and you even get introduced to bloaters for the first time, which are like super duper infected, and you get to see how scary they are and how much that they can wreck. I mean, when you come across a bloater in the video game, you know that you're like screwed. You got to figure out something else to do, because this is no like regular zombie.
It was also the first introduction at that same time where you can use infected and your other enemy people against each other to help to benefit yourself and to get out of a situation where you had seen that a few times in the video games, and it was kind of cool to see them turn that into the series as well.
Definitely true, because it is just an all-out war, people versus zombies, and both sides trying to just funnel in and do what they can literally at that point to basically survive against themselves. And then after that, you're kind of pushed into leaving finally Kansas City into one of Joel's main objective, and that is trying to find his brother Tommy, which he is eventually able to kind of succeed. And that's where you kind of see Joel kind of go through a little bit of his revelation, as well, as he's always kind of chasing something, but he doesn't ever seems to know what he's chasing for. But once you gets to Jackson, it's almost like Joel starts figuring everything out and knows, kind of maybe more so his role in life. Jackson is always just feels like such a major hub for the show and for the video game and now the show as well, that it almost just always feels almost like comforting the way that you come across Jackson, at least in my opinion, and it's always such a fun experience.
Yeah, and that short time leading up to the arrival to Jackson, I feel like you could kind of start to see some breadcrumbs being dropped as far as Joel's outer hard shell cracking a little bit and showing some emotion, maybe, particularly towards the relationship with Ellie. It's just very, very small bits, but you can kind of see it starting to show there, and it kind of takes the series for another turn once that begins to happen.
Yeah, the old hardened veterans finally starts getting a little bit of a soft spot. About time, too, because the whole time you're rooting for Joel to kind of crack out of his shell and maybe be able to start trusting people again.
Exactly.
And once you're introduced to Jackson, it's not too long that you do start to leave Jackson in the show. And I like what they did kind of in the next episode, where they kind of take us back into where the DLC for the game is. I'm glad that they kind of introduced that a little bit. And they bring us or introduce us to one of Ellie's friends, Riley, and kind of some of their adventures on how that they unfolded as one of Ellie's closest friends is kind of dealing with what they do. And I'm not familiar too much with the DLC, but I don't even believe that they went to school in the DLC, did they? Or was it basically just them going to the mall, Nathan?
I believe that they started off very similarly, where
Okay.
Ellie was in like the barracks, if you will,
Sure.
of the Fireflies, and Riley, or not the Fireflies, of the Fedra.
Fedra, yeah.
Um, and Riley shows up, and they kind of go on this adventure. It does start off very similarly, if I remember correct.
Sure, yeah. I really enjoyed that portion of it, seeing like what kids are dealing with, when the world has fallen, and how you're still trying to maintain, school structures and things like that, but obviously with, elements of survival at the same time, and what you're going to have to do to survive. But, it's also important that kids need to learn, how to be an adult eventually too. It's like that kind of stuff that goes on that you assume is happening behind the scenes, but it's almost very interesting to see how that kind of unfolds, in the show at least.
Yeah, and to that point, it kind of gives you a perspective like what that kind of a rugged type of world would look like. As Ellie and Riley are best friends supposedly, and when Riley's been gone for some time, and she comes back and ends up that there's this pretty significant secret that she's been keeping. That kind of ties in with a big part of the episode, and it's like, you could never keep that from your best friend in real life, right? But when you get into a circumstance like that, you have no other option.
Definitely. Yeah, so that was honestly a really fun episode for me as well, even though it dealt with a little bit more backstory. But then right after that episode, you're kind of really thrown back into the world as you get to meet David and James, which they're a part of. I can't quite remember, but it's basically the Lakeside Resort or something like that. And that they call their little development. And you really start to see, the direction of the show. This is where, it gets pretty darn close to its darkest moments, I'd always say. So we won't go into too many spoilers, but a lot of characters have to make insane decisions that deal with a lot of twisted people, and the way that they handle those situations, I think, are so delicate and so needed, but end in such a fantastic and character developing way. Reaching that resort is such a monument, I think, that the show and game both push you through to see how crazy this world really is.
Yeah. It was also a very critical moment for the relationship of Joel and Ellie. Just before that, Ellie helps Joel through a injury recovery, and all the way up into that, leading into that lodge cabin. And towards the end of that episode in particular, there's these really intense moments between those two where you can, I said earlier, Joel's shell is just starting to crack, and I think at this point he's fully accepted what that relationship is now.
Definitely. I have in my notes too that at this point in the show and the game, Joel is at his best. He's fully come out of his shell and has fully accepted Ellie. And this episode almost leaves Ellie a little broken. You know, Ellie has been more so out of her shell, but she goes through such a traumatic experience that she's starting to realize kind of the world and everything like that, and how everything is a little messed up. And it's almost like as Joel finally comes to the top, Ellie starts to slip a little bit. And I think it's very poetic how they honestly write that, to where Joel is finally 100% there, and Ellie almost just starts losing her mind a little bit just because of how she realizes that anyone else is just crazy out there.
Yeah, it's the perfect story to reflect on how two people in different circumstances end up truly needing each other and care for each other.
For sure. Yeah. And then that kind of leads then to the grand finale, where you get to see Ellie, you know, kind of conflicted with herself, and struggling on, you know, who she is probably as a person. Where, like we said, Joel has finally fully come out of his shell, and you can tell that he's really trying to become the father figure for Ellie and things like that. But you're still met with heartwarming moments there at the end. And I wouldn't consider it a spoiler, but because everyone loves talking about this scene, but you're finally introduced as you're trying to find your way to Ellie's objective to go to the hospital. I don't think I touched on it, but and it's not really a spoiler either, but Ellie is immune to the infection, for those that don't know. And her whole goal in life is to make it to the hospital where the Fireflies want to conduct and see why she is not, or why she is immune. But as you're seeing like Ellie at some of her worst, on their way to the hospital, they come to this parking garage or something where Ellie is on her way up, and you see a field of giraffes, and it just really kind of heartwarms you. Ellie is finally lifted up her spirits here again, and it kind of really warms up the scene. And it is a really kind of beautiful, touching scene where, you know, when all is kind of lost, there's still a lot of beauty out there.
It was perfectly done. I remember when we were watching that, the lead up, the couple of seconds right before the reveal of the giraffe, like, oh, here we go.
Yep, we finally knew it was coming. We were excited. But no, that scene was perfect. It kind of sets you up, and then leading exactly to the end, which we definitely won't get into too many spoilers here either, but you definitely should watch the show if you're not hooked already. But you're kind of finally then brought to the people that were kind of guarding the hospital, found them, kind of captured them, separated them a little bit, and massive dilemmas are in front of you. In fact, such hard dilemmas that once it is finally ending, you honestly are left debating what was right or what was wrong. And they do it on purpose, you know, kind of to really make it stick with you. And it definitely does. I kind of almost forgot from the game I knew how it ended, but how heart-wrenching it is, because it kind of ends with Joel almost picking what he would rather prefer than how Ellie would probably rather prefer the ending to be. And it really makes you think, was that the right decision? Is that what I would do? I'm not really sure, and but it's such a serious topic that it really strikes a chord with you, and you're really trying to figure out, is this the right thing or not?
Yeah, I definitely found myself in the same spot, even knowing what was happening and what was coming. It's like my brain is trying to process like the good and bad between it all.
Because there's just too much that happens that makes it, where there's no return. Like, these are permanent decisions that you're making, and you're not going to be able to hit the reset switch. It's a one and done, and you're going with your heart as you're going through it. But sometimes our heart leads us in the wrong direction, so it really puts you in a moment where it's like, did we do the right choice?
Yeah, absolutely. And somewhat off topic, but it was the ending was the one time in the show where I was starting to question what the direction, if they were going to finally go off track just a little bit from what
Oh,
the game,
sure.
maybe not change the storyline, but change enough of the steps leading up to it that it feels a little bit different.
Hmm.
Because it was just I remember it being such a controversial and just a wow moment
Hmm.
with how it wrapped up, and kind of the hype leading up to this finale episode. You start hearing rumors online. And it's like, oh, it's gonna be, you're either gonna love it, you're gonna hate it. It's like, what does
Hmm.
that mean? You know?
Exactly. But really, throughout, they really did do a good job at starting the series where it started in the game, and following it pretty much to a T throughout in the middle, and ending it exactly the same way as well. It was such a really almost like scene for scene shot that hits just honestly amazing as a long running fan of the game, to see it begin and end in like the exact same place and be so faithful in between.
Yeah, absolutely. You get so concerned with, you hear these adaptations from a game to movie or vice versa, however it appears. But um, I don't think I've ever seen anyone paid tribute to the original the way that they did, in such a great way, where it was like you can literally find clips online of the dialogue and match it up with like a 20-30 second clip, and it's identical.
Being
Like,
scene for scene, yeah,
yeah,
which is
it's
amazing,
absolutely
and
amazing.
all throughout the whole series.
Yeah, it's just, I can't. It's just
Yeah,
amazing.
can't describe it. Well, Nate, what do you have a favorite episode out of all 9 episodes that we had?
I struggled to come up with like an absolute favorite episode. I really like, we didn't touch on it too much here. Episode 3 was a recap episode, or a backstory episode that wasn't a part of the video game. It's called Long Long Time, and it recaps from the moment of the outbreak, with a gentleman who would probably just essentially call him a prepper, and leading up to the current day of the series, and just kind of taking him through the different stages of life in between that time. I thought it was really interesting to see like how someone like that gets through that life.
Definitely,
So
yeah.
that would maybe be my favorite episode. There were some like particular scenes or moments that I really, really liked. Um, but as far as the favorite episode, I think episode 3.
Yeah, it definitely was a episode that it took what an idea was in the video game. It was kind of basically set in stone. It just didn't take you through it too much in the video game, and made a whole full blown episode out of it, and also really humanized the series, for the viewers as well, showing people that people still are dealing with their day to day lives and still have these connections that they do seek for, and everything that they, I'd say, are as a person. You really definitely see the sides of like two different people that have come together, and are just trying to live out their daily lives
Yeah,
in a zombie
be
apocalypse.
be peaceful, and he has the run of this town all to himself, and he's set up the gas supply is back on, and he's got electricity, and
Yep,
he's
yep.
just living his best life, and he's got a secured perimeter.
Yeah,
It's
it is
just a kind
definitely
of
a fun episode because
cool backstory there.
Bill is the
Yeah.
prepper of it at least, and I can't remember his partner. Do you remember his partner's name?
Oh gosh. It'll come to me. It's
Yeah. Well,
escaping me
either way,
literally.
Bill and then his partner finally come together, and yeah, Bill has been basically, like you said, prepping for this moment his whole life. He's got his whole arsenal in his basement, and he's once the town is kind of fully like evacuated, he finally emerges basically from his den, and yeah, can get this whole town up and running, booby trapped and everything, and and can basically, I guess, live out the rest of his days.
Everyone's dream if the scenario would ever happen to us, you want to be built.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd probably say it's tough for me to say what my favorite episode is. It's definitely hard because, especially kind of like how I said, how hard hitting like episode 1 and 9 are. But I almost feel like that episode. Let me see here, where it could be like episode 4 or something like that, when you are leaving Kansas. There was so much I feel that happened in that episode, especially with the big horde breakout, and plus a lot of relationships that become heart wrenchers there too. It covers so much different topics that it really stands out to me. I when I think about The Last of Us, that episode always pops in my head.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is a lot that happens there. Don't want to go into too many details of spoilers, but I agree.
Hmm.
And just expand a little bit, like I mentioned, I have a couple of favorite moments, and I think those would be the outbreak scene in episode 1.
For sure.
We talked about it a little bit at the top, and that one really got to me. And um, uh, as Joel and Ellie are going to the resort cabin, and they're both at their separate, uh, doing their separate tasks at the time. And Joel has uh, this scene where he kind of transforms into this guy that you saw a lot more from the video game, and it just had some
Definitely.
cool flashbacks, doing some interrogations and getting some information out of bad people. That was a cool moment for me.
Definitely. That's a super memorable moment. It's amazing in the series as well. Do you have like a kind of a favorite I call it like a set or area, of the game? Like for reference, again, I kind of touched on it a little bit, but I just kind of really love Jackson. It's kind of a toss up for me, but between the world that they built around Jackson, but also as like a favorite set. I thought that the mall was a fantastic set
Oh, that's a
for
good
them to
one.
run in round in. It's a definitely a toss up between those two for me.
Those are both really good. Jackson was actually what I had written down first
Hmm.
as a favorite set. I didn't even think of them all. I think that's an awesome one.
Definitely
But
was.
Jackson comes to mind just because they did such a great job of literally building this kind of western type town out in the mountains where these people are just sufficient off of the land and what the resources are there. It just and you can as you are going down the street and kind of see all the different shops and people doing things and contributing. I thought that was really cool. It's a couple of images that really stuck out to me, where I believe it was episode 1 or early in episode 2, where you get a view as we're going through Boston. You can see downtown Boston and kind of the
Sure.
degrading skyscrapers.
Hmm.
Granted, it's largely CGI, but it's kind of just a really lasting image in my brain of like
Definitely.
what the situation is out there, what they're about to get themselves into.
Yep, and how things have unfolded. Like this is what the world is. It's definitely a good visual set in our mind.
Exactly. The last one I had noted down was the giraffe scene because I
Oh yeah,
just
for sure.
think it was beautiful. I loved it.
Yep, it's just definitely a beautiful scene. It definitely ties everything together and gives you that little bit of hope. How about I loved this. The original characters that voice acted in the game getting roles here in the game. The original voice actor of Joel played James, who you meet in when you go to the lakeside resort, and Ellie actually got to play Ellie's mom in a flashback on episode 9. Did you think that they tied those all in pretty well together?
Yes, I do. There's two really that stuck out to me. The first being Ellie, or Ellie's mom in the TV show. I didn't even catch that until they started discussing it in the episode recap, and then you start to hear her talk, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's obviously Ellie from the game.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I remember one of the creators or the producers stating that we wanted the people from the video game to have like an emotional connection to Ellie in the TV series. And it's just like light bulb, ding, ding, ding. Like, oh my gosh, of course. Like this, that is perfect. I
Hmm.
thought that was so well done.
Yeah, that scene in general was fantastic. The way that they, it was just kind of a quick little blip on how Ellie kind of has her immunity in a way, for fans to at least think and speculate about, that we didn't get in the video game. But yes, having the original voice actor for Ellie in that role was fantastic. And I thought that the way that they brought Joel, the original voice actor for Joel, into the series as well was really fun. He definitely played on enemy lines in the TV series, but still being in the role that he was, I still think he knocked it out of the park, and it was just like a perfect scene for him to be in. And also, it just was just so good to see those original voice actors into the game, or in the show, period.
Yeah, one other one that really caught my attention was in the TV show. His name is Perry. He's the right hand man in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
He was the voice actor for Tommy
Yep.
out of the
Mm-hmm.
video game. I think it more so stands out because I liked his performance in the show, even though he's more villainous, I suppose. You're not supposed to like him, but I just, for some reason, felt a little bit drawn to his performance, and I really liked it. So I noted him as well.
Yep. Yeah, that was also good. Seeing all these big characters that were in the game definitely get a shining role was definitely welcome for the fans and everything like that. And so I'd say, in my opinion, when you compare the show versus the game, I'd say identical. Honestly, if I could wrap it up in one word, slight changes here and there, but they did we kind of talked about it already, but just to hit it one more time, they did such a good job in between, like writing the lines so you can watch the show, play the game, get a few different experiences here and there, but still end up in the same place. They knocked it out of the park for both, that you're not missing out if you're only were able to watch the show, or if you only played the game or did both.
Yeah, I agree. Being when I played the game, I was very thorough. It took me a long time. I'd go search every kind of
Mm-hmm.
room and explore as far as I could. So I found myself in some moments like, oh gosh, I wish they would have spent a little bit more time here, like a little bit more time exploring Kansas City, because that was a really big
Mm-hmm.
part of the game. But then I think on it some more, and you realize that, well, this is still a TV series, and you can't spend minutes upon minutes with silence weaving around a basement and not
Yeah.
doing anything.
Yeah, that kind of leads into like our next point is there anything that you wish was different from the show that they didn't do with the games? And you kind of hit it on the head with that part there. There's a few points where, like I said, you kind of hit the height of the zombies in episode 5 there when you get introduced to the bloaters, and honestly they really do kind of tamper off. I would have almost liked to see like maybe one more episode in there where it was really zombie heavy, where instead of maybe 9 episodes, maybe we've got a 10th episode in there, and it was just more so going through a little bit of chaotic experiences. As kind of like you said, there's definitely in the game where there's a lot of just like chaotic experiences of you figuring out how to get out of like this zombie horde, basically. But it does kind of make sense why it wasn't implemented in the show, because when you think about how you played that out in the game, it was a lot of just crouching, figuring out how to get out. And although they probably could write something in, it would definitely have to be a lot more action packed or just condensed scenes, which maybe they could have plopped in a little bit more, like 5-10 minute condensed scenes into maybe a couple more of the episodes to kind of play out that effect. But yeah, I do wish there were some more zombies that were in the show. But as we kind of stated, it kind of makes more sense why they kept rolling with the story, fighting people and things like that for, storytelling purposes. That way things didn't maybe get boring or something like that.
Yeah. And another thing I had noted here, kind of tying into like some of the missing pieces, a big part of the game was finding handwritten notes along the way from previous people that had been in that area, and you really get sort of this connection with what that experience was like for them, and it usually almost always ended up in, you find out, leading to disaster for them. The scenario didn't work out, they didn't make it. So you find these notes along your journey depicting other people's struggles. I think there's maybe one instance of it in the TV series. That would have been something I would have liked to have seen more, because it makes it, for me anyways, a little bit more personal.
Yeah, definitely a big part of the game that was just kind of left out, probably just to try to keep interest and stuff like that. But it does kind of stink when you knew that you played it so much in the game and just know that it is missing from the show. I do agree with that.
I think, say what you were about to say is all in all that it was so like perfectly done. Still, we're nitpicking at things essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I'd still say, if we were to rate the show here, in my opinion, I still think that they smashed it out of the park. We can always, find something to nitpick on a series no matter what, but in my opinion, being that they still followed all the way through, I still think that they nailed like a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. I was satisfied basically the entire ride and on the edge of my seat all the way through.
Yep. Agreed. I have no arguments there. It was awesome.
Yep. If you haven't watched it yet,
I wish there was more.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, season 2 will come here eventually. Who knows? But we're both definitely excited for season 2. Either way, it's a good show. You should definitely watch it. Get HBO Max, even if it's just to watch The Last of Us out now. It's all out now, so you can binge it. But definitely follow it along. And Nate, thanks for joining here on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. See you guys.
See you guys.